Good morning. My name is Sophia Cao, President of the League of Women Voters, Southwest Santa Clara Valley. We cover the cities of Los Gatos, Saratoga, Monte Sereno, Campbell, and a small segment of West San Jose. Welcome to this league program, which is supported by all 5 leagues in Santa Clara County. Today is part 1 of our series on elections, systems, security, and threats. Part 2 will be held on October 29th, which will provide an overview and actual simulation of ranked choice voting, which is viewed as a means to engage more voters and open up the election process. Please make sure you also register for that event on our website. So today, we're very pleased to have with us the keynote speaker, Kim Alexander, along with our league member, Ravel and Mike Fong from the Santa Clara County Register of Voter Office with us. So now I will turn this over to our program resource chair, Ravel. Anne is a member of our league and has been involved in election work for many years. She was appointed by President Obama and served as the chair of the U.S. Federal Election Commissions and early on California Fair Political Practice Commission. Anne is frequently invited to other countries to observe their election process. She will be sharing some of the highlights from her most recent trip to Brazil to observe their election. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the introduction, Sophia, and thanks everybody for being here for this really important issue. Election systems, as we know, are an essential part of our democracy. But across the country, there have been attacks not just on the security of those processes, but as disconcerting, there have been incredible numbers, and I'm sure Kim will talk about this, of attacks on the election authorities, both at the state and the local level, for no good reason. And so that is a huge issue that is impacting our democracy and that we need to be very aware of. And hopefully, and I'm sure Kim will give information about how people can deter those kinds of attacks. I'm really pleased to have Kim here. She's a really significant person in the voting ecosystem in California and actually throughout the country. She's the president of the California Voter Foundation, which is a nonprofit, which she founded in 1994 to advance the responsible use of technology in the democratic process and to improve the voting process to better serve the needs of voters. She has engaged in lots of issues and has meetings regularly with secretaries of states and others who are interested and concerned about voting issues. And she's talks about not only the issues that we're facing, but where democracy and technology intersect, and working to ensure that democracy is enhanced and not harmed. She also has an amazing history of things that she has done, particularly in the state. She advanced electronic filing and internet disclosure of campaign finance data in California and nationwide. And through a series of reports, she assessed and graded states' online disclosure performance. She's edited the California Online Voter Guide since 1994, providing voters with nonpartisan election information so that they can make informed, confident voting choices. And she has worked to expand public access to online services such as voter status lookup tools and online voter registration. And finally, well, she has received numerous awards for her work, and rightfully so. She received a award by the Secretary of State, Deborah Bowen, and I have to quote this because it's absolutely true, for being a true believer in democracy and working tirelessly to make the system work better. So with that, I'm very pleased to turn it over to Kim, and I'm going to put something in the chat for everyone so that they can respond to Jim or ask questions. Kim.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne, for that really kind introduction. I hope you can all hear me okay. And does my sound good to you?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and for your shared dedication to democracy in our state and our country. We are in an unprecedented time of political unrest in my lifetime. Maybe for some of you, this is not a new situation, but just to kind of, back up with talking about, how we got where we are. We have to look at the conditions that gave rise to the vulnerabilities of election administration in the US in the first place. Elections are administered at the local level, and there's very uneven distribution of funding to facilitate election administration. And that often drives the amount of access voters have, the amount of talent an election office has, the amount of security they can have. And so that chronic underfunding of elections, I believe, is really what made and continues to make our election officials at the local and state level vulnerable to unfounded criticism and unable to respond as voraciously against it as some of them would like to, often just because of limitations of resources and staff. So I think we really have to keep this in mind. I know many of you would support funding for election administration. The League of Women Voters of California and our organization worked together in this last budget cycle to try to get $85 million in the state budget to fund election administration's election officials' ability to do outreach and voter education in this coming election cycle. So, it's something we're all working for, and we need to keep working for it at the federal and state level. The other thing to know about election administration in the US and in California is that it is predominantly, as many of you know, administered by women. 80% of the local election officials in the country are women, and predominantly middle-aged white women. And so it's an interesting demographic in and of itself that also can make folks targets of attack from misogynistic quarters. And that's the other thing that I've seen in the past 2 years, not just toward our election officials, but a lot of people in public service in our country in this COVID era that we've been in are finding themselves in a position to defend themselves against misogynistic and racist attacks that have become more prevalent, and violence has become more prevalent in the US as well. And so it's there's a pre-existing world of people in the US that have much more experience dealing with political violence than I do. And a lot of my work in the last couple of years has been about getting to know them and understanding how they deal with racism and white supremacy and other attitudes that lead to these, a lot of times lead to this violence, misogyny towards people in positions of power who they disagree with. So I just kind of want to share that observation at the top, because I am speaking with the League of Women Voters, which I know you are fundamentally focused on the issue of women, essentially, and our important role that we play in democracy. And I do feel women in particular are being targeted in this situation that we find ourselves in, which really kind of came to a head on January 6th. And, there are a number of people who are responsible for perpetuating what's become known as the big lie, that the presidential election was stolen from former President Trump, despite all the lawsuits being dismissed and all of the recounts finding otherwise, there is a small but stubborn and persistent subsection of American culture who continues to insist otherwise. And there are people in leadership positions who continue to foment the big lie. Some of them are elected officials, some of them are media figures, some of them are former presidents. But there's this constant feeding of it. And unlike other election cycles where there might be some questions about the results, I've been through plenty of elections where we weren't sure about the results, or, remember 2000, 2004, a lot of questions were raised. But at some point it died down and people accepted the results and moved on. That didn't happen after 2020. And that's new in our country. And so I just really want to emphasize that it's not like a majority of people believe this. It's a very small minority, but they're very vocal and very persistent, and they are undermining other people's confidence in voting. So it's important that those of us who care about democracy are informed about why our elections are secure and tell other people why our elections are secure. Anne mentioned some of the things the California Voter Foundation has been involved with over the years, and we have been at the forefront of the movement to get rid of paperless electronic voting, which I'm sure many of you remember came into widespread use in California following the punch card debacle of 2000. And the California Voter Foundation vociferously worked against paperless electronic voting because that wasn't verifiable. There was no way to independently audit the software. And so we worked for several years with a number of other organizations to change the law to require paper ballot, require voter verified paper ballot, make sure our audits are meaningful. And like a lot of things that happened in California, that reform spread nationwide. Once California said, you know what, we need a paper trail, all these other states said the same thing. And by the 2020 election, 95% of the ballots were cast on paper, which 20 years earlier, people would have said that's not the way things are going. But we turned the direction because of election security concerns. And so we got to the 2020 presidential election, and thank goodness 95% of the ballots were cast on paper and weren't cast over the internet or cast on DREs with no paper trail, because we were able to verify the results state by state, county by county, everywhere it was challenged, they were verified. Every time there's an election, things aren't perfect. These are run by human beings, and everything varies a little bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But ultimately, every place that was put up for a test was able to verify their results in a transparent and public way, which is what you want. And some people, continue to be dissatisfied with that. So I think that, my big takeaway from the 2020 election was that we actually got to the point by 2020 when we had the kind of verification in the US that we needed to give voters confidence. And unfortunately, a number of people have chosen to not pay attention to reality and are instead insisting that the election was stolen despite all evidence to the contrary. So that's where we are. I'm going to go to my PowerPoint and go through a couple slides now. So let me share my screen with you all and share. And now I'm going to put this on like that. So you heard about our mission. I am on Twitter, and so is our new program manager, Samantha Abelov, and CVF has a Twitter account. So I hope you'll come find us there. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We rely on contributions from people who support our mission and our program. So if you're feeling generous, please stop by our website and make a donation, which you can do through PayPal or through a check. We appreciate any support you can provide. We are a very small operation, so your dollars go a long way. Anne was talking about our online voter guide. This was the first project that we created. And at the time, our voter guide in 1994 was one of only 6 election-related websites on the entire internet. And now the internet is filled with all kinds of great election information. You can see a screenshot of our voter guide here on this slide, and you can go visit it at our website at calvoter.org. And we've got our November 22 guide up now, and it's the 31st edition. And it, highlights what's on your ballot, your voting choices. And we mostly use it as a way to refer people to other great resources, very high on our list. And actually right on our homepage, embedded on our homepage, is Voter's Edge, which is my favorite voter education website. I just tweeted about it last night as I was preparing for this presentation with you, because I used it to figure out that I have 32 local contests on my ballot, which is astonishing to think about how much homework I'm going to have to do to figure out those ballot choices. Voter's Edge is a League of Women Voters project with MapLight, which Anne is also part of the MapLight team. And it actually grew out of a project that CVF did with the League and some other groups way back in 1996 in Silicon Valley, that was Smart Voter, that many of you may remember. And that was the idea that, it's great that you can put all this information online, but wouldn't it be better if someone could just type in their address and get their own personalized ballot and see everything that's on it? And then they can just, go down the list and drill down and see what information is there. That's what Voter's Edge does. And you can look up campaign finance information. You can look up endorsements. You can look up top contributors. So top priorities. So thank you to all the League members who might be watching or listening, who are part of that. It's a tremendous public service that you're doing, providing that. So what's on the ballot? I think you probably all know this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do think it's important that we remember, one reason why there gets to be room for confusion is because we have confusing ballots and confusing elections. And one of the confusing things on this ballot is that we have 2 US Senate contests with the same candidates on it through this weird vacancy law that was passed recently. So there's a little splainer about this here on the screen and about it in the voter guide itself from the Secretary of State's office. But you might want to be ready to answer that question as you're going about your business as an informed Californian, that I'm sure many of you have lots of friends who ask you questions about the ballot. So this is a good one to be ready to answer. We also have all of our statewide contests, congressional, assembly, only 7 statewide ballot propositions, but they are not easy ones. So there's a lot of homework to do there too. And of course, local measures for county and municipal special district offices. Many of these were decided in June, because if somebody gets 50% plus one in the first race in the local contest, they don't advance to the general election. The contest is decided at that point, which is different than partisan contests, which is another point of confusion for California voters. My ballot, as I mentioned, has 32 contests on it. I was surprised and a little bit overwhelmed to learn last night as I was looking this up. And I just want to highlight, it includes 9 statewide offices, which is a lot. And it's very hard for people to know even what these offices do. In fact, the Board of Equalization was one of the things that motivated me to start the California Voter Foundation. Was I had to choose in that contest, and I had no idea what they did. And I thought, how are people supposed to figure this out? So the internet was just becoming part of our lives. And I was like, oh, let's put all this information there. And so now, now you can find out, thanks to sites like ours and the League of Women Voters and the Secretary of State's website. Here's a quick rundown of the ballot measures. I won't go into all of them, but there's some deja vu measures to keep in mind. The Prop 29, which there are a lot of ads about. This is the 3rd time we have a dialysis related proposition on the ballot. And then we have a referendum on the ballot, which is always counterintuitive, because the people who support the referendum are telling you to vote no because they're trying to repeal a current law. So that's always a tricky bit to try to explain to people when you're doing your voter education work. So I mentioned the threats and harassment. This issue is one that we've been involved with now for almost 2 years. We started seeing this uptick in threats right around the 2020 election in the fall last year, and immediately following the 2020 November election. So we worked with a graduate student from UC Berkeley, Grace Gordon, who did her master's thesis for Berkeley on this subject. And our board chair, Kathy Darling Allen, who's the registrar of voters of Shasta County, and I were Grace's advisors, along with her professors at UC Berkeley. And she did an amazing job showing a full picture of not just the kind of harassment and threats that 11 election officials she interviewed around the country were experiencing, but also the repercussions of those threats and the things that we learned, I think, that were really important. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of misogyny involved in these threats that was very disturbing. There was a lot of concern about mental wellness and mental health for election officials. There's concern that people are leaving their jobs, and we are seeing a high rate of turnover among California's county election officials currently. Following this election, there'll be a number who are retiring and did not choose to seek re-election. And we have this heightened fear, and we have to be very sensitive about how we talk about these issues, because we need to address the threats and harassment, but we also don't want to discourage people from wanting to vote. And so it's important for all of us, as we think about the next month in particular, to be very thoughtful about this, and to not convey fear to other people. It's very easy to become distressed about this news, and you have to remember that the news media is in the business, no matter what news media you listen to, they're in the business of scaring you and instilling fear. That's how they get you to keep watching. So it's important to try to look for the bright things that are happening and highlight those as well, and lift people up and keep people inspired. Some of the things that we recommended in our report included creating a network in the election community across sectors to support election officials and support election administration in general. And CVF did receive funding from Craig Newmark Philanthropies to start that network, which is currently underway, and is a very robust group of leaders across the country who share this commitment to supporting and protecting election officials. We also, in our report, stressed the importance of strengthening legal and law enforcement protections, curtailing mis and disinformation, and increasing funding for election administration, which I already talked a little bit about earlier. In the area of strengthening legal and law enforcement protections, one thing that we've been monitoring and have been involved with in promoting is the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Department of Justice Election Threats Task Force, which has been in effect for a little over a year, and they have collected about 1,500 threats from around the country from election workers, about 10% of which rise to the level of prosecutable threats, that the threats contain a threat of violence or death that is considered serious enough to be prosecutable. So there are prosecutions underway of people who are making these threats. Often they're finding that the people making the threats are living in a state other than the election official who they're threatening. So that's given a little peace of mind to election officials who are worried that people who wish harm upon them are in their same, supermarkets and in their neighborhoods. It appears it is much more something that's happening across state borders. And the FBI and Department of Justice are working hard on that issue. So we're happy to see that progress. We also co-authored with the Brennan Center for Justice Senate Bill 1131, which was signed by Governor Newsom a week and a half ago. And this bill extends privacy protections to election workers and to poll workers. And it has an urgency clause, so it took effect as soon as the governor signed it. So it's in place for this election. Election workers who feel threatened can now enroll in the state Safe at Home program or in their county's address confidentiality program to keep their home address private. And then just last week, we hosted this event called Peace at the Polls, California, where we had a number of speakers, including Attorney General Rob Bonta, to build stronger communication between local election officials and their local law enforcement officers to be ready in case there is conflict at voting sites before, during, or after California's election. We're hoping that doesn't happen, but the best plan is to be prepared. And so we want, and many others are working on this as well, building this communication, including former Orange County Registrar of Voters, Neil Kelly, who some of you may be familiar with, who is chair of the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, which is actively working to bring law enforcement groups and election officials together to keep voting safe and peaceful. So a couple of things you can do to help. Some of you probably do this already, but just election officials are hearing a lot of negative stuff from people, and it's nice for them to hear positive things. So, to bring food to your election staff workers, their offices, or to voting sites to the poll workers, flowers, balloons, chalk art in front of their offices, or some things that people have done. You can support your local election officials on social media, amplify their messages, help them get good information out to counter mis and disinformation. Sign up to be a poll worker. I'm sure many of you already do. Some folks are adopting vote centers in their community to help promote safety around vote centers, help with parking, help with signage. So that might be something you could look into. Hosting a ballot party is another way to really help people get through their ballot. You can do that on Zoom and let people ask people to take an assignment to take on one issue that's on the ballot and help prepare to get other people to make informed choices on that issue. You can personally adopt a voter. This is a program I know the League has done before, help bring a new voter into the process. And you can write thank you letters to election officials and their staff, which you can do on social media, or actually old-fashioned letters work too. Here's an example of one of the social media posts. We use the hashtag election heroes a lot on Twitter, so you might use that too. And I know there's a thank you election heroes day that's coming up the day before the election, November 7th. So also you can work to stop disinformation. A lot of time, just some things to remember. This is one of the key words I've learned people use to combat disinformation is the acronym SIFT, which stands for Stop, Investigate, Find, and Trace. So the first thing, if you see something that's really alarming, don't just retweet it. You have to stop and realize that people are trying to fake you out and get you to react and get you to act. So if you're having that reaction to something, don't react. Stop and take a closer look, investigate the source and the date of the information you're evaluating, find a trusted coverage that you know about that also covered it before you share something, and then trace the link that you're getting and see where it leads. Couple other steps we learned recently from our workshop last week to deal with overcoming the bystander effect. This comes from the Council for American Islamic Relations. They have a lot of experience helping people, unfortunately, deal with racist attacks and people being attacked in public places for wearing certain articles of clothing or appearing to be of a particular ethnicity. So their advice is to, first assess the situation. You have to check yourself when you're finding yourself in a conflict situation and ask yourself, am I ready to intervene at all? Am I in a state of mind where I feel I have the presence to be a catalyst for something positive happening here? Do I want to take on that role? You want to try to get other people involved. If you're in a public place and someone's doing something aggressive towards someone else, can ask somebody else, hey, are you seeing what's happening? Maybe we should be filming this. Then you want to go to the person who's being attacked and try to intervene calmly, introduce yourself to them, tell them your name, talk to them about the weather, talk about anything else other than the person that is being aggressive toward them. You ignore the attacker, even if they escalate. You try to just talk to the person who's being targeted, and you continue to help that person until the situation is dissipated or you get help if help is needed. And there's other tools out there you can find online about overcoming what's called the bystander effect. And then there's another set of tools called Clara, this comes from Princeton's Bridging Divides initiatives. Similarly, if you're if you're a poll worker and you're having a conflicting situation in your voting site, again, you want to calm and center yourself. You want to listen to the person who is venting and let them vent and express their feelings. You want to acknowledge their feelings. You want to respond, ask them to elaborate, show that you're listening, and then assess the situation. And if they haven't calmed down once they've expressed themselves, you may need to stop and get help, and you need to be aware when that situation might happen. We have some resources on our website for helping with through our Peace at the Polls page that has more de-escalation tips. And then just a quick highlight, California Secretary of State runs a rumor control page, which is a great place to go if there's things circulating right before the election that need fact checking. And then we have a directory of all the county election offices. Secretary of State has one too. And then that's how you can find me. So I will stop screen sharing and thank you for listening.
Kim, there's a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to ask you. One of them was, you said during your presentation that a small minority of voters believe the big lie. And this person seems to think that that is really the majority of Republicans who believe it, and the majority of Republicans, members of Congress, that espouse it. Do you think that she's right or wrong in her view?
Well, she may be right about the majority of Republicans in Congress. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the stat. What I was trying to say is that there's a minority of people who believe that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. I think that's a pretty slim minority, but their viewpoint has undermined the confidence of a lot more people, particularly among Republicans. So, if you ask, and there was a poll that was done of California Republicans after the recall election. And I don't know if you all recall this from the recall, but Larry Elder claimed that the election was stolen, that it was rigged before the ballots were even counted. And he actually put up on his website some very frightening messaging about implying the use of violence to respond to stolen elections. So that was pretty shocking. And the PPIC poll taken after the election found that 49% of California Republicans had little or no confidence in the security of elections by the time we got through California elections, by the time we got through that election, which is no surprise. I think that the tide is turning within California. We also saw during the recall a lot of complaints about the use of drop boxes, which I know is happening in other states as well. And there were efforts by the California Republican Party to set up drop boxes that were not authorized. And there was a big tussle between the party and the Attorney General and Secretary of State, if I remember correctly. And they're not doing that now. So they have different messaging now. And I think that I think and hope that there are enough leaders within the Republican Party, both at the state and federal level, that are realizing that their voters like to vote by mail. Republicans historically have been much more stronger users of vote by mail than other parties. So, you can't keep winning elections if you tell people that the elections are being stolen without evidence, and that the voting system method they prefer to use is not reliable. So I think that, it's a matter of folks realizing that's not a good strategy and taking a different tactic. But I do think that and not even just the 2020 election, but the 2016 election, where we had foreign adversaries, primarily Russia, coming in and tainting our election and undermining people's confidence and putting out all kinds of crazy mis and disinformation. That took a toll too. And so you see among a lot of younger people, I find in my conversations, they have a lot of doubts and they're just not sure. And so it's all the more reason why people need to reach out one-on-one to folks who are not voting or not thinking about voting, and be that ambassador to help get them into the process and overcome all the media messaging and fake news, frankly, that they may be being exposed to on a regular basis.
Well, funny that you raised the issue of the recall, because one of the other questions has to do with, and I heard that there was some legislation pending about recalls, but the question is, what state steps has the legislature taken to prevent another recall for no valid reasons?
You know, there was legislation considered, and I don't think that it made it through. I think I would have heard if it had. There's a lot of talk about reforming the recall process after the recall, and there were hearings, and the little Hoover Commission did an evaluation of that. So, but I don't think that there's been any action. I'll tell you, the one bright light out of the recall was the last time we reformed California's recall laws, there was a new law that was passed that required the state to reimburse counties for recall election costs. And so I believe it was $239 million that went to counties for election administration, which was a first that the state actually paid the county's money simply to administer an election. That's what we think should happen every election. We think the state should pay at least their share of the cost. We have 9 statewide offices, 7 ballot propositions, state judicial positions, and state legislative positions. So the state is taking up over 50% of the real estate on the ballot. They should be paying at least 50% of the administration costs.
Yeah. So another quick question is someone who's going to be a poll worker is being trained for it. And the question was whether he or she should ask them to make personal information private.
Well, the good news is that under SB 1131, counties are no longer permitted to publicly post the names of poll workers. So this law was just signed, and the Registrars Association was part of the bill and supported the bill. And so they were, in fact, they recommended this provision for the bill. And we included it at their request. So the poll workers' party affiliations and languages spoken are still going to be made public for accountability purposes, but the names of those poll workers will not be made public. So I think anybody who has a concern about this, just check with your registrar or whoever's training you, make sure they're aware that SB 1131 was passed and that they no longer have to post the names of poll workers at voting sites or on their website or anywhere. In fact, they're prohibited from doing so.
Okay. And Eleanor, I don't know if you want some of these to be asked. Do you see a geographic pattern of threatening behaviors towards election officials? Is that more likely in one part of the country than another? And I think you might want to comment about, because I know that there was a registrar in California who decided to quit because of threats. So
yeah, thank you for that question. There's this perception that this is only happening in battleground states, that it's not happening in states that are considered blue states like California. We're a very big, diverse state, so we've got all kinds of people here. I like to remind people that more people voted for Donald Trump in California than any other state in the country. So we have a very, the Republican Party is in the minority in the state, but it's a huge part of the state, huge membership in the state, all over the state. And I'm not, I'm not at all implying that people who voted for Trump are the people who are making these troubles. I'm just letting people know that we have lots of different kinds of voters in California. And so you have rural parts of the state where there can be a very conservative element. It's not just about being a Republican. Some of these folks are affiliated with militias, affiliated with white nationalist groups. So we are seeing in areas like Nevada County and Shasta County, which have both been covered quite a bit in the news, more aggressive activities around elections, more confrontational activities. Nobody has been harmed. There was a scuttle in Nevada County at the beginning of the year that did cause one of their staff people to be some activists tried to force their way into the elections office when it was closed to the public. But the more troubling thing that happened in Nevada County was the staff there was trying to enforce the mask mandate. It was the height of the Omicron virus being rampant. And the sheriff in the county didn't believe in the mask mandate and didn't want to enforce it. And so that was very distressing, because you want the people in authority at the local level to be in support of each other, not at odds with each other. And so that really was part of what inspired me to want to organize this Peace at the Polls event and ensure that election officials are talking to each other. There is with local law enforcement. There is this small but very vocal movement of law enforcement officers in parts of the country called the constitutional sheriffs movement, and they claim to draw their authority from the Constitution, not from local or state government authorities or federal government. So that's very troubling, and people are researching that. So you got to keep an eye out for whether those people are involved in your county. But again, we're a big state. We've seen, we saw in 2020 there was an incident with a ballot drop box in Los Angeles County. There have been incidents in LA where there was a shooting at a voting site, not relating to the election, but a voting site had to be closed. So things happen. There are a lot of people with guns in our country, and so you do want to be prepared. The California law does not allow law enforcement officers to be at voting sites in uniform, but counties are able to hire plainclothes officers if they feel it's needed. And if you are working in a polling place, just make sure your election office has told you what to do if there is a situation that arises at your voting site. And make sure the Secretary of State knows about it too.
So one more question. We don't want to overstay our welcome, but there was a question about what do you think about the not insignificant cost of having a candidate statement in local races?
We did some work on this issue actually a couple of years ago. We got a bill passed that allowed candidates to submit an electronic statement that would be available online as an alternative to the paper statement. If a county offered it, we couldn't get it mandated, because then the state would have to pay for it, and they don't want to pay for any election programs. But we made it optional for counties to be able to offer it, and I don't think that they're doing that. But the idea was to give candidates an alternative path to the paper book and be able to make their statement available online for a fraction of the cost. So I think it is a shame. The candidate statement to me is the most important thing of everything that we get from campaigns, because it is the one thing you can use to hold that person accountable if they're elected, to say, well, you said on the record, these were your top priorities. And so I think it should be more affordable. There are a lot of things about elections that should be more affordable. And, you have to remember there are a lot of people in this state, particularly in the Democratic Party, that pay a lot of lip service to democracy. But at the end of the day, a lot of them, I shouldn't say a lot of them, some of them, really just are worried about their own election and whether they get reelected. And actually expanding voter turnout doesn't always help politicians, can make it harder to predict who will win and who will turn out. And so I think sometimes there's this, I think that's partly why we've had trouble getting funding for voter education and outreach, because while we're saying, hey, we want a voting public, and someone asked, what are our top priorities? One of our priorities is shaping a voting electorate in California that looks like all of California. And we don't have that right now. The people who vote in California are whiter, richer, older, better educated, more likely to be homeowners than most people that live in California. And so, to get a fair representation of everybody is going to take a lot more work than we're doing right now. And that's going to take money. And so I think that we need to impress upon our elected representatives of all parties that it's in everybody's interest for everybody to vote. Because if people don't believe in voting and people aren't voting, they're going to find other ways to make their opinions known, and they're going to be a lot less peaceful than casting a ballot. So hopefully that will be one of the upsides of this era of political violence that we find ourselves in, is that more people will realize that it is in all of our interests for everybody to be participants and to believe in the power of our vote and in the power of democracy.
Can I ask one last question
Yeah.
that I care about a little bit, because I've discussed this with Shirley Weber, but she hasn't agreed with me. So I know that the largest number of ballots that are by mail that are nullified are from seniors or people who don't speak the language, although there are ballots in other languages, but also seniors and disabled people. And the question that I have is, part of the problem has to do with the signature on the back of the envelope, and that it doesn't compare easily with the signature of when they registered. And I wonder whether it would make more sense to have a voter number that's attached to their ballot that they could use.
Like a pin or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, the signature comparison method is not always the most practical, but it's the best thing that we've come up with. And the problem with the signature comparison is that somebody else could have someone, if you have a pin, someone else could have your pin and use your pin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing that we've done with vote by mail is we're allowing all these people to vote remotely. And we have to do a lot of extra work to make sure that nobody votes more than once, and that people are voting their own ballot. And that's a lot harder to do when you can't watch the person filling out the ballot. They're not in a booth in a, polling place for a limited amount of time. And so, giving people that freedom to vote remotely means that we have to do extra work to verify that the voting process is still secure. And I think a signature is better. We've done a lot of research around ballot rejection. In fact, CVF was the first organization to shine a light on the issue of ballot rejection way back in 2012. And we did the first study on this issue back in 2014. And we found that young people of color, and first-time voters were more likely to have their ballots rejected than people generally. And that's a real problem, because vote by mail already favors the people who are already overrepresented among California voters: homeowners, wealthy people, white people, suburban people. They already favor vote by mail and are comfortable using vote by mail in a way that other people are not. So, I think that we have to pay attention to the fact that we are pushing out a voting process now that we're mailing everybody a ballot that is not equally embraced by all Californians. And that's why we want to make sure that in-person voting options remain visible. That's what we wanted the state to provide money to the counties to help make sure that voters with disabilities, people who need assistance, that they know that they can go to a voting site and vote in person. They don't have to use that vote by mail ballot. So that's another area I think the league could really help get the word out, make sure people know about their in-person options.
Let me just add something to that, since we're going to go into Latin America in a moment, in a discussion of Latin America. And a number of the Latin American countries have something called Voto en Casa, and it's mainly for seniors, people who are disabled, and they actually bring a very secure voting booth and a machine to people's homes. And so there's somebody there that can assist them if they need it.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of ways to provide assistance. Election officials will go to someone's home and do curbside voting. And these are all services we could provide much more easily if there was more funding available for the counties.
Right.
Okay.
Well, is that you, Sophia?
And I just got a note in the chat from Lois. Thank you, Lois, saying there was a minor change made to the recall process. So maybe she'll share that link out to the group, but thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Anything further from anybody? Okay, well, thank you very much, Kim. Really appreciate it. It was really, really helpful. And I'm sure everybody else did too. It was very good information. So thank you for taking the time.
And if
Great,
I could
thank
just
you.
chime in, this is Eleanor Yick speaking, and also on behalf of the League, Kim, we really want to thank you for taking time out on a Saturday morning and joining us. I think this is one of the best presentations that I've had about voting and the work that's going on to try and deal with the threats and the security issues. So we're really grateful that you had the time and took the time to meet with us this morning. And I know you're under a hard stop too, so I want to respect that and make sure that you're able to leave by 11 o'clock. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I enjoyed the task of putting together this presentation for you. It was a good opportunity for me to collect my thoughts and share them with folks who I knew would be eager to hear them. So I appreciate that opportunity as well. And thank you all for the important work that you do to help people vote in California. I hope you all have a great election season.
Okay, thank you again. Anne, I know you're going to share with us now some of your observations from your recent visit to Brazil, and their national elections were taking place. So we're eager to hear about what you observed and maybe some things that you observed that you think we should be aware of in this country. Okay.
Well, to begin with, I think everybody might have seen this was a very contentious election. Because there were 11 candidates, but the two top candidates, one was Bolsonaro, who is a friend of Trump's and very similar to Trump, actually. And the other is Lula, who was president previously, as Bolsonaro is the president now. But he was thought to be the front runner in this. The polling clearly said that he was the front runner, but right even before the election, Bolsonaro said, "Oh, the election's rigged." And he's been talking for a very long time about how the voting machines are fraudulent. And what is really interesting, and I think it was good that Kim mentioned about how our elections are administered at the local level. In Brazil and in other Latin American countries, the elections are administered at the federal level only. And in particular, they all have electoral courts, which actually run the elections. And so it is justices and chief justices who run the election, who make sure that the machines are all out. And Brazil is a really big country. And during this election, I actually saw photos, which I don't have copies of, but of boats taking election machines to voting places in the Amazon, for example. So they have a really big task, but they've had these machines for a number of years, and many people have questioned them, but in reality, there has been no evidence of anything that is untoward or not proper about the results. And they do have paper sort of that comes out. It looks like it's coming out of when you go to Safeway and you're getting a really long receipt. The voters don't get the receipt, but the voting officials do, and they examine them to assure that the votes were correctly counted. And what is most interesting, and I think Sophia might be showing at some point a copy of the machines, but here's something interesting too. But what's most interesting is they get the results in a huge country that has more voters than the United States, because Brazil requires people to vote. They have to come. They don't have to actually fill out their ballots. They can nullify the ballots if they want to, or not fill them in, but they have to show up. And if they don't show up in Brazil, they can't get passports and they can't get government jobs. And it's one way of trying to increase civic participation there. But the other thing about the vote that's unique is because there are so many voters, and so many people they were voting for. It was not just president, it was for Senate, they had the results in 4 hours.
Wow.
They're amazing how quickly they have them. And that's very important because a lot of people there also suffer from some of the fake news kinds of things and believe it, though the justices told me they didn't believe it, that the Brazilians saw it in 2018 and now they know not to believe it. But I keep thinking about our experience in the United States and think that's kind of unusual. I sort of think they probably do believe some of that. And so, they do look at all of those issues. And there was the picture that Sophia had on about, which I think is kind of, I just saw that, thought that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. The one of the woman wearing a cape with Bolsonaro on the back. That is Bolsonaro. And on the other side, she has a headband saying Bolsonaro 2022. And in the United States and most other countries, you are not allowed to wear t-shirts or anything that displays the candidate that you're supporting, but they call it silent communication. And silent communication is legal in Brazil. And the only reason that I have that picture is because I thought it was hilarious and she was willing to, allow me to take a picture of her. So that was wonderful. But let me also say that Brazil, as well as other Latin American countries, Mexico, for example, is good in this. While we have a lot of women who are election officers, they have many laws relating to parity for women, requirements in the Supreme Court for parity for women, requirements as election, not just observers, but election people who are in charge. And also the parties have to nominate, in Brazil, 30% women for all the various positions. In Mexico, it's 50%. And as a result, they have a much greater representation of women in elected office than we do, particularly Mexico does.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to me to see all the different things that they do in different countries in Latin America. And because I do some work with a group in Argentina, that in this case, I was the jefa, which is a great title. I tell my husband he has to call me that. But I have arranged for this group, which consists of a lot of people from Mexico, including some indigenous people who work in the electoral process for the indigenous governments in Mexico, but people from Peru and Argentina, and they are coming to San Jose, California, and meeting with our registrar and observing the election here, the first election observation in the United States by a foreign country, Latin America. And then they're going to LA after that and meet with the registrar in LA, which I think is great because election observation is pretty important because it's independent people who can look at the processes and make recommendations about whether or not there was something that seemed undemocratic or problematic, and also not egalitarian and not giving enough access to voters who need to, particularly people who are disabled or otherwise, who have difficulty voting. So
thank you so much, Anne. I love hearing about your visitations in different countries and how they do their voting and how they deal with issues that we're attempting to deal with too. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to invite Roberta Holloman to come on and introduce our next speaker. Roberta?
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to introduce Mike Fong from the Registrar of Voters Office in Santa Clara County. We're so pleased that he's been able to join us and give us some local perspective. Mike's official title is Manager of Election Logistics and Voting Systems. He will be telling us all about what his job encompasses, highlight some local election security and voting issues, and also will tell us how the league members can get more involved in the election process. If you have questions for Mike, please type them into the chat at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have time to answer a few. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Mike Fong. I am with the Registrar of Voters Office in Santa Clara County. I just want to share some information with you about our security and our administration of our office. In the chat, I left a link for you all. So all the things that I'm telling you, plus a lot more, is on our website, where the security information or election security integrity information is there. There's like a nice, really detailed 42-page report that we've done just recently. And that has been public for a while now. And all the things that I'm going to tell you now, which basically I'm going to summarize some of the things that are security related or integrity related, right? Because a lot of people think security is just like hardware or just machine, but when in fact, security is a lot more. So I hope everybody can see the screen. I have a few screens that I want to share with you. And again, later on down the line, if you want to actually read the entire report, this was done with our office, and a lot of subject matter experts have contributed to that. And majority of it is written based on the county policy and the procedures that we have. Okay, so going to screen one, our mission, right, or the ROV's mission is to protect and ensure this community's right to participate in fair, inclusive, accurate, and transparent election. And to achieve this monumental mission, there are many, many things, as you can see in our the bullets here, to safeguard the integrity, right? So this includes the security, right, the infrastructure, the voter data information, the voter-centric product design and creation, things for the voters. There's election management software, voting system, things that we do at pre-election, at the vote centers, how we handle vote by mail, things that we do after the election, and what technology services and solutions are utilized to create this whole operational. And then what we give the information to the public to ensure that everything we do is for the voters, you know, and for the transparency and accuracy of the election. So as I said before, I'm kind of giving you this link on our on a presentation now, but I also pasted it in your chat. So you are welcome to go check this out and go read that. Okay, so like I said in the past, or not in the past, but earlier, it's not just equipment or just machine. There is many, many things to this. So first thing is election with information. This is where we only use, for example, certified equipment. That is whether certified by the state or the federal, and is, you know, vetted through the county and our office. And then we only use essential program, meaning only softwares that are needed, that are allowed, and that are authorized to use. We don't put unnecessary softwares, or we're not allowed to just install software or place things. The other thing is we have many outside agencies and state level security support. This is where we are in communication with many other jurisdictions, such as the Homeland Security, right? The Election Assistant Commission, our DA's office, our Secretary of State's office. And we share information about what's going on, what we can learn, what's happening, and how to protect ourselves, and what are some of the vulnerabilities that we find. And we try to what we call harden the process. And I'll give that to you a little bit more later on. And we have these security standards where it is employee allowed access, or there is a specific public allowed access to certain information. And then there are backup plans, meaning we don't just leave something on a computer and go home for the day. We actually have backups that it keeps information about what happens, and we can go back and research. We keep reports, we keep archives, we keep all sorts of, I guess, ways to make sure that the policies and procedures are followed, and also to make sure that we are doing all of the proper steps and features. The security at the ROV, in this case, where we are, basically this is towards the voters. We have our election management software. You may hear this called as EMS. This is where we maintain all of the information about voters, the signatures, the addresses, the streets, the jurisdictions, who the candidates are, what are the ballot types, what are the voting precincts, what are the registration precinct, what are the districts. These are all information that is kept and is very protected information. And we're not the only one with that software, or we're not the only one with the system, meaning there is a higher level of technology or informational department that maintains the server, that is make sure that it is behind a what we call a firewall or secure access. So people just can't jump on a computer and say, hey, let me have access to a server. That's not how it works. And there are multi-layer of control so that no one person may go into servers or in the software and do things without somebody else finding out. And everything we do in our office is auditable, meaning there's always a trail behind if someone updated a file or changed something or did something within our system. And there are information that we communicate with our voters when their information is changed, or district is changed, or their voting precinct change. We let the voters know so that they are also aware of what's going on, and we're not just doing things in the background. And we also communicate with other agencies, like I said, for information accuracy. So US Post Office, we have a secure connection with Secretary of State's office. We share information with our County Information Services Department to make sure that all the information, all the security features are up to date and where they're supposed to be. Communication with Secretary of State's office is just not software or just phone calls. We have meetings. We get together. Many ROVs always have meetings. We talk about what's happening, what's going on, what are the new laws, what are the new security, what are the new nuances that are happening that is in the election land. And we all try to make a sound judgment on how to handle or how to mitigate some of these information that we're getting. And we also follow strictly to all applicable laws and requirements. This is not a choice. And then we design materials, signs, information for the voters, thinking about how voter need it, what is it that they need, how to keep security, how to make sure the correct ballot from the correct voter is counted if they are eligible. And if we have time later on, I will talk to you a little bit more about if someone signs an envelope and if it doesn't match, what do we do? Or if someone forgets to sign an envelope, what do we do? We have those options. And also, as it was discussed earlier, we have multiple methods of voting. If you don't want to vote on a piece of paper and you want to use an audio, we have that. If you rather use a touchscreen machine because you're having a hard to see, we have that option. If you want to use an accessible device like what we call sip and puff or foot pedals, we have that option. If you want to use different languages, we have that option. So we want to make the voting easier and give it many choices for our voters to be able to vote privately and securely and on their own without having to have another intervention. Okay. Our technologies we use play a very critical role. We use only latest, up-to-date, and certified program and certified software. We do collaborate with the county technology department and information security, make sure that these programs have proper features, proper encryptions, proper softwares, proper patches, things like that. So make sure that we are always up to date. The other one is, some of you have heard this before, we call it air gapped. Our actual voting system that you vote on and where we count the ballot, actually it's not connected to anything but itself. Meaning, in order for me to get access to this, I physically have to go to the system and do something with it. For example, counting ballot or retrieving information. I have to go to that system. There is no connection into the voting system that you can get into. And we also conduct, prior to election, we call it LNA, or logic and accuracy testing. This is to make sure that the voting system is doing what it's supposed to do. If I put in 10 votes, I need to see a report that says 10 vote was cast. So we want to make sure that testing is done before election and post-election. And we use many mitigating features and measures such as seals, access, limited access cards, limited access medias and technologies, so that no one person can do many things, where it's limited to certain level of users and administrators. And of course, for every software, every program, every system, there are password protections and encryption procedures, so that you can't just walk up to something and say, let me do this, and it allows it. And this process of many mitigating features are called security hardening. And at the vote centers, we also, again, for our security processes, we teach, we write, we train, we provide support, we provide materials. We have policies and procedure that is written specifically to support the voters, how to handle, how to let them vote safely and in their own privacy. We have security processes and features, meaning these things, when there are voting machines that close down at the end of the day, there are checklists that we must comply, and we check what we got, or what was a vote count the day before and what was a vote count the day after. And at the end of the election, we check against how many votes, how many signatures, how many paper was used, how many ballots came out of it, and how many ballots were brought back to the ROV. We check against each number from many different sources to make sure that if 10 people voted, there were 10 ballots, there were 10 signatures, and there were 10 tally numbers that counted it, just to make sure. And for physical security, where we do have security tier system, earlier Kim alluded to that some places don't necessarily have law enforcement or uniform, but we have systems where if there are just a simple security breach or security issues, there's a tier 1, and or let's say there is a mad voter, there's a security 2, or there's some sort of a safety threat, there's a security level 3 that we have, and we train these vote center workers to make sure that they are understanding and how to approach each security. And we have many command centers, we have field techs, just to, again, to make sure that there is a safe voting option. Right? And then there's post-election canvass process, where everything we've done prior to the election and during the election, we check ourselves to make sure that it is what we did, and it is provable that the votes is what we counted, and that's what people voted. And of course, every system and equipment that is put out at a vote center, they are all password protected, and again, only authorized access are there. Now, these are just few things that I have mentioned that are in the office for the voter, the technology, and the voting system. There are many other mitigating factors within our process that you can go look again on the website, and you are welcome to call us, and you are welcome to come visit us. I know you've heard this before, but we always invite our public and our in this case, voters, to come and see what we do, come and ask questions, come and observe, come and see, and learn and ask questions and get answers so that we can be at most transparent. And again, my name is Mike Fong. I am with the Election Logistics and Voting Systems. I'm giving you my number, my email. There's also a general number that you can call. Pretty easy to remember, 299-VOTE. Just ask for Mike Fong. I'm here. And we also have a website where it's sccvote.org. And literally any information about elections, security, volunteering, working, what's on the ballot, where do you vote, where do you go find vote, how do you vote, how do we count ballot, every information is on there for you in case you have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. That was a great presentation. We do have a few questions from our audience. One of them is, has the Santa Clara County ROV ever received any threats during the actual counting of the ballots?
We have not. We are very security conscious. We have not had any threats or any violence against our office or equipment. However, like Kim said earlier, there are people that are very passionate about election, and occasionally we hear incitements, but we take every phone call, suspicious activities, and even just our own safety, our voter safety, our system safety very seriously.
Okay. And another question, if I have a disabled person or a person who needs special help in order to vote, to consummate their vote, how would I go about getting that special help?
So there are many ways to do this, right? Let's say if you are homebound or you are location bound, there is a way where you can get ballots requested through a family member or designated person where ballot can be brought to you and filled out. Or if you are mobile, meaning you can go to a vote center and let's say you have visual, audio,
Right,
dexterity, everything, you can say, hey, I want to vote, but I can't see, right? There's a feature, there is an accessible machine at the vote center that allow you to vote using audio and the touchpad. And that is ADA approved, ADA accessible touchpad that you can use. Now, if you need an assistive device, for example, Sip and Puff, that assistive device also allows you to use Sip and Puff. And it has the same feature where if you need to use foot pedals, they have that. If you have dexterity, for example, you don't have use of your extremities, we have tools that are given at the vote center where you can actually wrap around your arm and has a little tip. It's called a salt tip where it allows you to touch a screen. We could do it that way. If you have certain visual where we can have the images of the ballot reverse contrast or zoom in and zoom out, we have that. And if you are also visually impaired, and if you need to do things on, let's say, signing in, there is actually a little plastic piece that allows you to feel and say, oh, this is where I go sign, or this is where I go touch. And we give you that. And we train all of our election officers and support staff to use accessible features and systems and abilities.
Okay, thank you so much. And this is at all the vote centers?
Yes, all of the vote centers,
Okay.
and even at the registrar of voters office.
Okay, thank you. Another question, what do you suggest a voter do who has developed a tremor in terms of when they sign their name? Should they re-register to vote with their new shakier signature?
So that is a very good question and something that I've seen. I have seen many, many voters who registered many, many years ago, early on, and I have seen tremors and or difference in the signature. However, first thing is, yes, change your registration with your new signature. Now, the other one too is I know that option is not always readily available at all the time or convenient. All of the ROV staff who go work at the ROV office get training on reading signatures. So if you Believe me, Marianne, if you sign your name with a little swoosh, no matter whether you have a tremor or not, I will find that you have a swoosh. I can tell that you developed a different style. What we worry about, or at least there are laws that allow us now, is when you drastically change your signature. A lot of people, when you go to a Safeway or your grocery store and somebody's standing out there say, hey, sign this petition because you feel strongly about it, and you give it a chicken scratch, that becomes your new signature, right? In the system, because we saw that as your last signature. Now you try to sign an envelope with a different, now your chicken scratch and your real signature no longer match. Or if you, for example, sign an envelope and you forgot that when you sign your original signature, you write it nice and legal way versus a shorthand. When you change that, we no longer can physically match your signature. I do want to let your constituents know, we physically compare your envelope signature and the signature that is on file next to each other.
What if they don't match?
Right. So here's what I'm going to tell you. If they don't match, we will send you a letter and a correspondence saying, hey, Mike Fong, your signature don't match. Please give us your true signature and an affidavit saying that this is my signature. And we wait for that up to 28 days after the election for you to fix your signature. Now, let's say you forgot to sign your envelope. We also send you a correspondence twice saying, hey, Mike Fong, you forgot to sign your envelope. Please sign this affidavit saying this is you are, so that we can count, and we still wait 28 days after the election. So we give that opportunity for voters to fix their ballots, and we hold it just in case you actually walk in or you send that affidavit. And we actually go to the post office up until the last day to say, give me any envelope that people may have sent in, their fixed signature or missing signature. I want to make sure that I want to be able to count every eligible ballot. We do have that feature.
Oh, right. Thank you. And one last question.
Sure.
Is it too late to re-register to vote?
You can re-register anytime, even up until election day. You can literally vote on register to vote on election day and say, I want to vote right now. We will let you. But of course, you have to meet all the requirements, right? You have to be citizen, you have to meet the age, you have to be living in the county, so on and so on. And long as you meet all the eligibility, it's a CVR, right? Conditional voter registration. You can literally register to vote and vote at the same time. That option is there.
Thank you so much, Mike. This is fantastic information. And now I'm going to turn us back over to Eleanor.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I really appreciate it. And I'd be happy to do this many, many times.
Thank you, Mike. I think you were a wealth of information that I didn't know. And I'm so impressed with all the systems that our local Registrar of Voters has in place, and many things I learned about options that are available at vote centers I had absolutely no idea about. I'm so impressed with how accessible we do try to make voting for all of the people who live here in Santa Clara County. So thank you, Mike. We would love to. We're going to take you up on your offer to come back at another time and give us more information. But thank you so much for showing up today. You really added to the program.
You are welcome, and I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the weekend, everyone.
Thank you. And that brings us pretty much to the close of our program today. I hope everyone who's attending found it as interesting and informative as I did. I really feel like I learned a lot this morning from listening to our speakers, Kim Alexander, from learning about international elections with our own Ann Ravel, and then hearing about our local Registrar of Voters office with Mike Fong. I think the program was really comprehensive, and I so appreciate all those speakers who were willing to join us today. I also want to thank the team members who organized this forum today, this program today. So I'd like to again thank Ann Ravel. I'd like to take our League's president, Sophia Cow, who takes care of all the technical background for us. Roberta Holloman and Marianne Shovlin from Cupertino, and Lois Smallwood from our league, and myself. It was a great planning group, and I think to kind of toot our own horn, I think we did a really good job. So I do want to remind, of course, all league members and attendees that the election is coming up, of course, on November 8th, but our league is now ready to present our pros and cons, and we're doing our first one this Sunday, October 9th at 3 o'clock, and then we're doing a second on Wednesday, October 12th at 7 p.m. If you're interested, please go on to our website and you'll be able to register there. And in conclusion, the last slide, I do want to remind everyone again, what you attended today was part one of a two-part program. And we're going to follow this up with at the next event on October 29th. We're now going to take this information about security, threats, and access to voting, voter disengagement, more security issues, and what's a possible solution. And some solutions are being tried in various places throughout our country, one of which is an election system and changing to ranked choice voting. This is something that the league at the county level has supported in Santa Clara County. And in fact, we just recently sent a letter stating our support to the Board of Supervisors as they move forward with some decision making. So we are so pleased that on October 29th, we have Celia Nolan joining us. She is a national organizer with Rank the Vote. And our own Steve Chesson, who is going to lead us through an actual simulation of ranked choice voting. So spread the word, and I hope everybody in attendance today will be back on the 29th and bring a friend with you. So again, thank you very much for attending. Have a good Saturday afternoon. Bye now.